Hi, today I'm here with Kyle Doudrick, who's an associate professor in our department. Welcome, Kyle.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Kyle, so why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
So I was born in Missouri, raised in Memphis, Tennessee, and pretty much spent my entire raising to adult life there. I got my bachelor's and master's in civil engineering at the University of Memphis, where I grew up. And then I went and did my PhD in environmental engineering at Arizona State University. And the topic of research there was environmental nanotechnology.
Okay.
And then from there we moved South Bend.
You moved to South Bend, and yes, if I remember, we always joke about the fact that you were living in Arizona, and when you interviewed here was one of the worst winter storms we've ever had, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a story.
So that was
sure.
that was definitely an interesting recruitment. Cool, that's great. So, I mean, you already mentioned that you did some nanoparticle work as part of your PhD. I know that you did some of that when you first arrived here, but your research has expanded and broadened so much. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your research, and why people should care about it?
Yeah, so I'd say there's still flavors of that intertwined in my research focus, but the bigger picture is emerging contaminants. So thinking about not only ways that we can treat these emerging contaminants. An emerging contaminant is a contaminant that's found in the environment or your drinking water that is not yet regulated. We know it has a toxic effect, and we know it's there. So thinking about ways that we can treat these, and then also thinking about how we measure them and track them in the environment. So there's we still do some of the nano catalyst stuff to treat the emerging contaminants.
Well, I know that the big one that you've been working on that has been in headlines all over the place, the forever chemicals, right? PFAS.
PFAS, yeah, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances is the majority of the work that we do. Another big one that we've gotten into is nanoplastics.
Nanoplastics.
Yeah, so I won't even tell you about how many nanoplastics you ingest from
I don't want to think about
A to Z in your household.
I don't want to think about that, that's for sure. And let alone when I go swimming in open waters or anything like that. No, okay. I mean, these clearly sound like important topics. If there's an undergraduate or somebody who's interested in pursuing a career in this realm or this area, what advice would you give them at this stage?
At the undergrad stage, I think a lot of what we do in the lab, as any lab, isn't necessarily what you would be doing in consulting now, but you may be tackling those challenges 10 years from now. So I'd say my biggest advice is just try to get involved in undergraduate research if you want to work on the state-of-the-art, the forefront of environmental engineering topics.
So as you know, I'm a modeler. I developed an allergy to a lab during my PhD where I managed to flood it 6 times during experiments. So I guess my question is to you, what does a typical day in your lab look like? What are you and your students doing there?
Yeah, I mean, it could range from cleaning glassware, the stuff that they hate to do. One of the projects we have for several experiments that we're conducting experiments on is an incinerator. So we're burning a lot of stuff right now that's contaminated with PFAS. Day to day is just getting the furnace fired up and getting samples in and out and collecting the gas phase and the solid phase results. And I tell you, it was really a learning curve for me as well as the students and postdocs, just because we had never really worked with high temperatures and pressures.
Something like that?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we don't get any interesting stories associated with that. Okay. So you've been with us here at SEAS for a while, and I always get the impression you're happy and content in the department. So what would you say your favorite thing about SEAS is?
This is probably a pretty cliche answer, but I just enjoy the people that I work with and the university as a whole. I think even outside the department, most faculty that I've interacted with, staff that I've interacted with, students, etc., it's been a really good experience and interaction. And not having a position anywhere else, I can't say that that's normal, but it feels like that's kind of unique. So I think that's a really nice thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of us feel that way.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the reasons why people stay here for as long as they do. It's pretty wonderful in that regard. Okay, let's switch it up a little bit and ask you some personal questions. I know you're a father with young children,
yes.
So I imagine you don't have a huge amount of time for hobbies, but what do you do in your free time?
Great question. So I have 2 children. One is 3, my son Adrian, and then my daughter Vera Ellen is 1.5, so 1. And I had kids later in life, so I actually had many years to build up hobbies. So I have several hobbies that I no longer have time for. But yeah, I like landscaping, gardening, getting outdoors, hiking, backpacking, kayaking, biking, reading books, listening to audiobooks, photography, board games, actually, real board games, not the cheesy ones, yeah. European board games is how we classify it. Yeah, those are probably the main things. I used to play a lot of volleyball, beach volleyball, some indoor volleyball, played that at a pretty competitive level for a while, and then my shoulder gave out, and now I've switched over to the old man sport, which is pickleball.
Pickleball, yes.
Yeah, so
we just bought a set that we set up in our driveway.
Yes, having fun with that. But yeah, I still get to do that stuff every once in a while. I have this bad habit of buying musical instruments and then just being really bad at them.
What instruments do you play?
So I have a guitar. That's probably the one I'm the best at. Also have a keyboard, violin, clarinet. Those are probably the main ones, and then like harmonica.
Well,
stuff like
between some of the early hobbies you were talking about, the outdoorsy stuff and instruments, as your kids get older, you'll have a full band and lots of activities
I'll
to
swing
do.
right back around to them one day, I think. Yeah.
I mean, I went hiking with my son on my back, once he was 6 months old. I loved it. It was great. That's cool. And then music. I mean, you talked about the instruments you play, but what kind of music do you like?
So when I was in my early 20s, I actually worked at Best Buy when they had the media department. This is when half the store was CDs and DVDs. So I worked there for 2 years, and man, I tell you, this is probably not good financial advice, but my paychecks came home as DVDs and CDs.
I believe it.
So I have hundreds and hundreds of CDs and DVDs still in the basement. So music-wise, all genres I enjoy. Listen to a lot of bluegrass, classic rock, hip-hop, electronica. I mean, you name it. I kind of go in waves where I'll listen to just one genre. I'll just wear it out. I probably listen to roughly 2 to 3 hours of music a day. Correct. So music is pretty heavily involved. Yeah, and yeah.
It's funny, that story, because just the other day I was trying to explain to my daughter how $10 a month for Apple Music or Spotify is a bargain, because I used to spend a fortune on CDs. It's funny the way those things go. And how about books? Are you a reader?
Yeah, pretty avid reader. I've been reading, since I was a little kid. It's been a big part of my pastime.
Any particular genre?
Genres is fantasy and science fiction.
Fantasy and science fiction.
First book I ever cracked open that sold me was The Hobbit.
Okay.
Around 7th grade. I was like 12, 13 years old.
You'll have to give my son some recommendations. That's his favorite genre too.
I have hundreds, yeah. So in all, it's probably been 150 plus, either book or audiobook in that genre. Science fiction, I'd say one of my favorite current authors is Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, which became a very famous movie.
Yeah. I've heard the book. Well, it's always the case, but I've heard the book is much better.
The book is good. There's another one, Project Hail Mary, which I would highly recommend, and it's going to be, I think, a movie.
Okay.
That comes out soon. Yeah.
Okay, that's very cool. And then the sports. Are you a sports fan?
Yeah, huge sports fan.
What sports do you like, and who are your teams?
I like the NFL.
Okay.
And it's Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh yeah, that's what Kansas City is the very first city I came to in the United States, so I've been a Chiefs fan for a long time too.
So it was a good win the other week.
The name like Patrick Mahomes, he's Irish, right?
There you go.
What are we? Sorry. And then the last question on this one, which is the one that is I always find interesting when you're talking to engineers. How about art?
Art. So I'd say art. We'll go to two things. The first is photography.
Yeah.
Landscape photography is my favorite area of photography. Ansel Adams is obviously the greatest of all time in that realm. There's a newer guy, Rodney Luff Jr., who I really like. He does some beautiful medium format landscape photography.
Where do you find this? Do you look at it mostly online, or are you going to like exhibitions in Chicago or anything like that?
Mostly online. I've actually been to his studio in Vegas before,
okay.
Which is really neat. Both of them have been inspirations for my own work. I haven't done as much here, but when I lived in Arizona, I did a lot of landscaping out there.
I imagine Arizona's a pretty good place to do that.
Art-wise, I'm a fan of Impressionism. I think the Art Institute of Chicago is really nice to have close by. There's two museums in Paris that I really enjoy. The first is the Musée d'Orsay, which is a lot of Impressionism. It's got, a lot of Monet and Van Gogh. And then there's
That's where you guys spent your honeymoon, right?
Yeah, it is. Musée Lingerie, I think it's called. And that has that really cool water lilies. It's like almost panoramic.
Nice.
Of Monet's, which is really neat, yeah.
Well, very cool. Well, that certainly gives us some insight into you. I mean, that was between your music and arts and hobbies and inside and out, you've got a rich life going, that's for sure. Any last words you'd like to share with our audience?
Maybe for the young undergrads out there, I would say my wisdoms are to don't sweat the small stuff. And to trust in yourself in the decisions you make. I find that a lot of undergrads are stressing about decisions, whether it's career decisions or life decisions, and you're going to make the right decision, and just to trust your gut.
I think that's wonderful advice. Well, thank you very much for your time, Kyle.
Okay, thanks.
Take care. Thanks for doing this.
Yep.